Welcome back to Film Hooligans. I'm John, the host, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jason Alt.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for clicking on our video.
Tonight, we are talking about the 5 movies that fans of The Princess Bride will love, but may have missed. So, Jason, why did we pick The Princess Bride as our litmus test for these films?
Princess Bride is a good movie, and lots of people like it, and lots of people know about it. Lots of people whose parents were 5 when the movie came out, right? Like this movie. Princess Bride has a lot going for it. It's very quotable, you know? It's very funny. It's got a great cast. Everybody loves Princess Bride who's seen it.
Just happened to look behind us and something is there.
He's obviously seen us with the princess and must therefore die.
Pick up one of those rocks, get behind the boulder. The minute his head is in view, hit it with the rock!
I was not a sportsman.
We kind of think that there were some other movies that are sort of like set kind of in a fantasy world and like have some humor or some romance or, you know, just like adventure. There were some movies like, hey, before you write in the comments, like, why no Willow? Man, everybody's heard of Willow. We tried to pick some obscure movies that we think, you know, people, you know, just haven't heard of and like we're turning you on to. So like, yeah, we think Willow's great, and we think Willow is something that fans of The Princess Bride will really like, but also you don't really need us to tell you about it. If we do call one of your favorite movies obscure and you're like, but there are tens of us on the Facebook group for it or whatever, sorry, like this is just on the basis of the research we conducted, people we talked to, our own personal biases. We think these movies are obscure enough that we would like to tell you about them. We like most of these movies a lot. Let's get started.
I think that we came up with a fine list of 5 films. First, let's talk about The Princess Bride. It came out in 1987. This is just one of those pillars, those tentpole movies. It was a modest showing at the box office when it came out, but it has gone on to become one of the most popular and recognized cult films of all time. It was directed by Rob Reiner, stars Cary Elwes as Wesley and Robin Wright as Buttercup, as well as a smattering of the who's who that fills out the rest of the cast. Everywhere from Andre the Giant to Billy Crystal to Carol Kane. Basically, it's a very exciting, romantic, and funny movie. It does all 3 of those things probably as well as you can in the cinematic universe.
Absolutely.
So we are judging the 5 films that we have carefully curated to go against the 3 pillars of what makes The Princess Bride so memorable. And what are those pillars, Jason?
Pillar number 1, is it an exciting film? Is there a lot of excitement, a lot of action, not a lot of downtime? This is going up against Princess Bride, which has a lot of very good sword fighting scenes. There's a castle siege. Andre the Giant hits somebody in the head with a rock, right? Like, Andre the Giant's on fire. Good fights and good sieges, and, you know, a dude climbs a rope, like, straight vertical. That's cool. We want to pick movies that are as exciting as Princess Bride was, because Princess Bride's an exciting movie.
It's a swashbuckler. So what's the next pillar, Jason?
The next pillar is humor. How funny was the movie? Princess Bride has a very good cast of comedic actors. You got Billy Crystal, you got Wallace Shawn, you got Carol Kane. Christopher Guest, who went on to make tons of hilarious mockumentaries, is in the film.
Yeah.
And Cary Elwes is a wise-cracking, sarcastic leading man. You've got a lot of humor in Princess Bride. We think if a movie is going to be similar enough to Princess Bride, it's got to have lots of good jokes, lots of good quips. Being quotable is a big help. But in general, does this movie make you laugh?
Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line!
Number 3, what are we judging on?
We think the third most salient element of The Princess Bride is how romantic a film it is. Young Fred Savage wasn't a fan of the kissing stuff, of course, but, you know, for us, we think this movie has a lot of fun romance in it, and we would ideally like a movie similar to it be a romantic film as well.
Let's see if any of our other 5 contenders could kind of match up to any of these things. So let's get to our first contender, Jason. This is 1996's Dragonheart.
Pesky critters, dragons.
You!
Like big rats. You never seem to get rid of them.
Dragonheart was, we feel like it's a pretty obscure movie, but it was a very good action adventure film in a fantasy setting. We think not a lot of people have seen this movie, but we feel like a lot of people would like it. It was basically this or like First Night, right? Like Dragonheart stars Dennis Quaid and the voice of Sean Connery as a dragon and a dude who sort of have a nice little grift going on where he pretends to kill the dragon for money. He doesn't really do it. And then they got to do dragon stuff at the end of the movie. It's not very romantic, but it was a very fun and kind of a decently funny film.
It's a family-friendly fantasy adventure that picked up, in my opinion, where Jurassic Park kind of left off with cutting-edge VFX of the time. This director, Rob Cohen, never made a single film that I liked besides this film. So, you know, responsible for such bangers like Triple X. He did do the first Fast and the Furious. This is a movie that it almost felt like it was made in the intention to sell toys. And I feel like there's a little bit more substance there. So, is this like The Princess Bride?
The three axes, entertainment, humor, and romance. We gave the movie's scores out of 5, and then we're going to average them. Kind of give us a sort of a score out of 5 on how similar it is to The Princess Bride. So this is a little bit subjective. We understand that, but like, once we average these numbers twice, we're going to pretend they're very objective. You're getting our opinion, so that's just the thing that's going to happen. John, out of 5, how did you score how exciting the film Dragonheart was?
So the excitement, I think, was probably its strongest suit out of the 3 because, I mean, just having a dragon in your film, and especially a competent-looking one, the filmmakers decided they wanted to go with a Muppet version, but they didn't get the articulation and those, like, sweeping, you know, like, flying scenes as much as they wanted, so they kind of relegated themselves to a 100% VFX dragon in Draco, voiced by, you know, the late great Sean Connery. The problem with that is it was shot 90% in the daytime because at night he looks fantastic. Dennis Quaid does a good enough job as this buddy cop merc thing with a dragon. I'm gonna say on an excitement level from 1 to 5, I'm gonna give it a 3. Jason.
I concur with John here. I really liked the aspect of it where it's sort of like they were doing a grift. I thought that was kind of neat. And, you know, the film wraps up in a very exciting and dramatic fashion. So I gave it a 3 as well.
So that brings us to our next pillar, Jason. Is this movie funny? So this is probably, I won't say the weakest part of it, but aside from Sean Connery just being so likable and make you smirk a little bit, I kind of found this movie a little devoid of any humor. Not entirely, because I think the charisma alone of Sean Connery as Smaug or Draco the Dragon was enough to at least give this a 2 in the humor column.
I actually liked it a little bit more than you did on that axis. I kind of thought the initial premise of it was playful enough. I like the fact that like a sort of drunken, disillusioned ex-dragon slayer kind of teamed up with the dragon he used to slay, you know, as like a little money-making scheme. I thought the premise alone was enough to juice this to a 3 in the humor category for me.
Okay, so now let's go to the last pillar of if it's similar to The Princess Bride, and that is in the romance category. I am just going to say that it's unfortunate because there's an implied flirtation that we got on the screen, but I guess there was supposed to be more of a romance between Bowen and Kara. Bowen, of course, played by Dennis Quaid, and Kara, Dina Meyer. The studio told the filmmaker to just scrap that, get back to the dragon stuff. So unfortunately, I feel like it is 100% devoid of any romance. I'm going to give it a 1 in that category.
That's too bad, because this was like peak Dina Meyer, right? This movie came out right between Johnny Mnemonic and Starship Troopers. At her peak desirability as a romantic lead. So I felt like that was a bit of a waste. And this could have gotten up to like a 2 or 3 if they had kept their original attention, but I guess that would have made the movie a little too busy. If you average our 2 scores and then average the 3 categories, that gives us a 2.167, which is the reason this is in 5th place. Good movie. You probably would like it if you haven't seen it and you looked it up, but not quite enough like The Princess Bride to make the top of our list, and it was mostly just because they cut off all the romantic stuff before they shipped it out, and it could have been a little bit funnier.
But at least it did sell a shit ton of Draco toys like it was supposed to. It went on to spawn a bunch of direct-to-DVD sequels. So, I mean, who's laughing now?
Patrick Reed Johnson, the guy who wrote the screenplay, has like written every one of those direct-to-DVD movies. So, like, I guess he's laughing all the way to the bank.
Howard Shore's score is fantastic. And however, we do have to move on from Dragonheart. So let's get on to our second movie of the night, Jason. That is Kroll from 1983, directed by Peter Yates, starring Ken Marshall as Colwyn, Lynette Anthony as Liza, and Liam Neeson as Keegan.
Thieves, bandits, fighters, and brawlers.
Desperate men. Those are the kind of men I need.
Well, you heard him. We are now an army.
I shall be your king.
In the fortress, you will face more than the slayers.
What? Kroll.
An exciting blend of fantasy and sci-fi based around a princess and a warrior getting together to join kingdoms, but are there as many sparks in their chemistry as there are lasers in their swords, Jason?
Out of all the movies we picked, Kroll is the most like Princess Bride in that there is a sort of a damsel in distress. The prince and his friends have to rescue his bride from this weird, disappearing, reappearing Marvin Acme castle with his weird, like, razor boomerang thing. So for 1983, like the same year as the Dire Straits Money for Nothing video came out, like the VFX in this movie are pretty good. Like Dragonheart, they were nominated for an Academy Award for Best VFX, but it doesn't look like a Ray Harryhausen stop motion movie when you go back. You know, the effects aren't as dated as you might think.
Although it was the Ray Harryhausen apprentice that did the effects for like the spider and stuff. But let's get right to the rating. Starting on excitement, there's lots of exciting set pieces. It even has a swamp scene with quicksand in it, similar to the Fire Swamp. The Beast was a great end boss, but the minions are a little bit more intimidating than Power Ranger putties. It sags in a few spots. Legendary score by James Horner. On excitement, I would give it a 3. Jason, what did you think about how exciting Kroll is?
See, I like, perhaps it's because I saw this as a kid, you know? I wasn't a kid in 1983, calm down, but like, you know, it was on like Cinemax probably or whatever. When I was younger, for a PG movie, I thought it was pretty exciting, you know? Kind of reminded me of like Red Sonja or a movie like that.
Yeah.
So I actually gave it a 4 for excitement because I really dug it, and I think this is real rewatchable. So even if you've seen Kroll before, congratulations, we're reminding you to see it again. It really holds up.
That brings us to the next pillar, and that is humor. And unfortunately, I feel like this film was completely devoid of any purposeful humor. If it wasn't for Ergo the Magnificent, played brilliantly by David Batley.
I am Ergo the Magnificent, short in stature, tall in power, narrow of purpose, and wide of vision. And I do not travel with peasants and beggars. Goodbye.
Besides him, not a lot of yucks. I give it a 2.
See, I felt exactly the same way as you did, but I gave it a 1. And I realized that 1 is our lowest score. But hey, look, man, this wasn't a comedy. So, like, we don't have to pretend it was.
Let's go right to the number 3 pillar. Is Kroll romantic? Is it a shame that Ken Marshall didn't get a fair shake in the 80s? Because I think he really had some leading man material going on. The person that they put that was his wife, or the woman that he was marrying, she was 17 years old when they filmed this, so it's a good thing that they didn't push the romance. I'm gonna give this a 2. They're just not on screen enough together to kind of push that score up.
I wasn't going to mention the fact that she was 17 because, like, who knows how they do things in the Krull universe. But what I do know is that she was barely on screen with him. I gave it a 2 only because, like, the whole impetus was to rescue his bride. Like, if she'd been on screen at all, this could have been a 3. But as it was, I could only really give it a 2.
Which brings our final score to...
Drum roll, please. Just kidding. Don't. Oh, God. Don't embarrass both of us with the drum roll. I averaged the average of averages, out to 2.33.
2.33. All right, let's move on to our number 3 film. I think this was one that you were really excited about, and that is Lady Hawk from 1985, directed by Richard Donner, starring a very young Matthew Broderick as Mouse or Philippe Gaston, Michelle Pfeiffer as Isabeau, and Rutger Hauer as Navarre. A slow burner fantasy. The backbone of this movie is a love story between two characters that are forced apart by a magical curse. And then you have Matthew Broderick in there doing Ferris Bueller stuff in a fantasy setting. So, Jason, what did you think about Lady Hawk?
I thought Lady Hawk was very similar to Willow. And it was one of those weird things where, like, Lady Hawk, Princess Bride, and Willow all came out around the same time, but for whatever reason, Lady Hawk, despite being nominated for 2 Academy Awards and making quite a bit of money and being directed by Richard Donner, of all people, for whatever reason, younger generations just either don't remember or have never heard of this movie. You know, you'll find Princess Bride stuff at Hot Topic, not so for Lady Hawk. For whatever reason, younger people just don't seem to have heard of this movie, and we'd like to bring it to their attention.
It's probably definitely the most obscure movie on the list. So let's judge it on the excitement. It has, in my opinion, a bit of pacing issues, but when we get down to it, there are some exciting battles. It's kind of on par as some other similar films. I think the most gut-wrenching part is a hawk getting an arrow through the heart. It didn't quite get there for me in the excitement department. I'm going to give it a 2.
So I disagree entirely. I mean, entirely to the extent I'm going to give it a 3. I didn't give it a 4 or 5, but, like,
yeah.
I don't know, man. I thought 3 was like the bare minimum you could give this movie in terms of excitement. Like, I agree there were some pacing issues, but also this movie was pretty exciting.
All right. Well, we disagree on the excitement level, but let's talk about the humor. And Broderick constantly having the inner struggle with the out loud with God was pretty funny. I think if it wasn't for his just charm of his line delivery, it would have been pretty anemic as far as the humor went. I'm going to also, unfortunately, give that a 2.
This movie really needed a Val Kilmer type.
Absolutely.
You know, like, you throw Val Kilmer's character from Willow into this movie, it's a 3 or 4, but as it was, I got to give it a 2.
Yeah. And Isabeau and Navarre's curse really drives the plot for this tale. They go through extreme lengths just to be with each other again. And the two actors have a moment of real fireworks and chemistry towards the end. You know, it's the driving force of the entire plot, so I have to give this one a 4. I think it really succeeds in the romance category.
Concur with you there. I don't know what would have given this a 5. But it was just my gut feeling, and that's what we're going to go with.
Absolutely. So that gives us a final score of?
The average of our averages, 2.83 for Lady Hawk.
Ooh, let's get to the number 2 movie on the list. This one was something that kind of surprised both of us. I think I underestimated the obscurity of this one for anyone, under 30 years old, because I really figured that everyone has seen Legend from 1985 just because it was such a mainstay in my household growing up. Directed by Ridley Scott, starring Tom Cruise, Mia Sara, and Tim Curry.
See, I did think this movie was going to be obscure enough for this list. Everything you said is true. This is directed by Ridley Scott, starring Tom Cruise, Mia Sara, and Tim Curry. But I feel like anyone under 30, for whatever reason, missed this movie. There are some movies that just kind of enter the zeitgeist. Like, people under 30 have heard of Goonies. People under 30 have heard of Nightmare Before Christmas. You know, there's just stuff that sort of invades the zeitgeist, and then people keep coming back to it. You know, there are 5-year-old kids that have heard of The Breakfast Club, but Legend, for whatever reason, if you missed it, it's gone.
I trust you, Lily. Nothing is more magical. As long as they roam the earth, evil can never harm the pure of heart.
You know, this is no never-ending story. This is just a movie that, as good as it was, never really hung in there, and we wanted to make sure that if you haven't heard of this movie, definitely check it out.
It's so sad because, I mean, it has the, like, best makeup effects of any movie that still hold up to this day, of Tim Curry's The Darkness, who looks like the devil. I mean, that's probably an image that you've seen that you didn't know that you've seen. But let's, judge it against the movie that we're talking about. So is it like The Princess Bride? On Excitement, I feel like there is a lot of planning and building up to the confrontation with the darkness. There's a lot of cool fantasy elements leading up to the main battle, I guess, for lack of a better term, because it's not really a battle. It's more of a puzzle thinker than a swashbuckler epic. As far as excitement goes, it only measures up to a 2 in my book.
Completely disagree. I think you felt like it was a little slow, but why'd you watch it so many times if it wasn't exciting? See, you would have probably given Labyrinth a 3 for excitement and give this a 2. I would flip-flop those, I felt like this is very similar to Labyrinth. So if you like Labyrinth, you'll love Legend, but I feel like this was more exciting. I gave it a 3.
All right, fair enough. Let's go to the humor category. Definitely some lighthearted and whimsical characters in here, but it plays more like a dark fantasy with disturbing images than jokes itself. However, I wouldn't change a thing about that. I think that's its strong suit. I love that it went so dark, and there is some imagery that still frightens me to this day, like aka the Bog Witch. I wouldn't change a thing, but if we're just scoring it on humor, I gotta give it a 2.
Think Tim Curry in It versus Tim Curry in something like Clue. Also, if you've never heard of Legend, you probably didn't realize that they made an It in the 90s with Tim Curry, so you don't know what I'm talking about. But Clue it's a board game. Your parents have it. Gonna give it a 2 as well.
Yeah. Finally, in the romance category, this is where this movie shines. In my opinion, this is probably the movie that we're going to talk about the most that's like The Princess Bride. I mean, it's romantic, it's sexy. The 3 lead characters are just oozing with charisma. Lust is the driving engine and the MacGuffin of this movie. It gets a 5 from me.
I thought this was a little less sexy and a little more exciting than you, so I actually gave it a 4.
All right.
I wasn't just being a contrarian. I just thought that was, that was what I thought, but I still gave it a 4, and that was good enough to get us to a 3 overall.
That is a strong score. So what, Jason, dare I ask, can unseat Legend? That is our number 1 movie of the night. And this is a movie that is quite a head-scratcher. It's 2007's Stardust, directed by Matthew Vaughn, starring Charlie Cox, Claire Danes, Michelle Pfeiffer, Mark Strong, and a very interesting role by Robert De Niro.
Victoria, for your hand in marriage, I'd cross oceans.
You're funny, Tristan. Oh, Tristan, a shooting star.
I'd cross the wall and I'd bring you back that fallen star.
You can't cross the wall. Nobody crosses the wall.
This is the part where you tell me who you are and why you're up here.
We're just trying to make our way home.
Touché.
You'd better be telling the truth, you two-faced dog.
I can get you one of them, actually. Very good guard dogs. They can watch the back and the front door at the same time.
Enough.
Where's the girl? You have seconds to live.
Now we shall begin.
I know what you are.
Get him.
It's just you and me now.
Not for long.
Hold me tight and think of home.
The coming-of-age romantic fantasy that literally Matthew Vaughn was going for, Princess Bride. Not, I don't want to say ripoff, but definitely an influence. So when a film tries to emulate a film, does it succeed? I'm going to ask you.
For a movie starring Catwoman, Daredevil, and the taxi driver, I thought it was pretty exciting. I don't know if per se he was going 100% for Princess Bride, but this was Neil Gaiman Neil Gaiman can write stories people like, it turns out. He knew exactly what he was doing. He hit all the right beats, and it's no surprise that this is number one on our list. What is surprising is the fact that we could even include it. Yeah. For whatever reason, like, people have heard of Willow, but not Stardust, which came out in 2007. The only thing I can think of is people, like, the weekend it came out. It came out the same day as Rush Hour 3, which made twice as much money, and it came out a week after The Bourne Ultimatum, which made 10 times as much money. So I feel like this movie wasn't advertised very well, and I saw it in an empty theater. My friend and I went to this movie, like, 8 p.m. I think it was, around that time. It wasn't like we didn't see like a matinee. We went sort of, peak movie time, and the theater was empty, but for the two of us, which was sad. This movie has sort of done well enough on DVD to kind of make up some money, but it didn't really do great at the box office despite its pedigree.
Let's get right to it. Why does it stack up so well with The Princess Bride? I mean, Stardust is full of backstabbing royalty, evil witches, and lightning pirates that sail through the clouds. It's everything that you want in a Magic the Gathering set. It gets a 4 for me on the excitement scale.
It got real close to a 5 for me. I feel like there were parts of it that lagged a little bit. It's Neil Gaiman, so it's overwritten. And there's a little bit too much exposition. And there's like a lot of, I got to explain the fairy tale world I created for just one story. Like dude, the guy can write like a 10-page short story. So like, I feel like it was just a little bit overwritten, and it takes a little bit too long to get going. So Princess Bride, I feel like they handled the exposition a little better.
It's paced better, right?
Yeah. So I couldn't give this a 5 as much as I wanted to, but I gave it 4. Got real close.
Yeah. Humor is next, and I think that I love the fact that Matthew Vaughn made the choice to go as dark as he could as far as the context of this world goes, because there is just like straight up murder. There's a point where someone's getting their throat slashed, but it's almost played as like a gag, and they have like blue blood, so they kind of get around. It's like that, Super Nintendo Mortal Kombat thing that they kind of get around getting an M rating for. I love it. It's witty. It's more of like, if you're into like English humor, you'll probably like this more. So if you're a big Edgar Wright fan, like Shaun of the Dead, all that, you're really gonna like this. With that caveat said, I'm gonna give this a 3 on the humor scale.
I entirely disagree, if only for Robert De Niro's cross-dressing lightning pirate character. I thought this had just enough yucks to keep me interested. I can't give it a 5. It wasn't Princess Bride funny, Sure. I wanted to give it a 5 just because I thought it was very funny in the right spots for not being a comedy, but just it's not quotable. This movie's not quotable, and I think that probably hurt it, Maybe it would have caught on if people had been quoting it at school, and they're like, well, what's that from? There's really nothing to quote from this movie, so like you can't give it a 5, but I did really enjoy it. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, you can't quote bits, right? Like they take their joke, they build up the jokes in this. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're laughing at. It's not so much just single, one-liners or anything. So it's a little bit more highbrow comedy, dare I say, but not as funny as The Princess Bride. So that brings us to our last tentpole, romance. It's a guy going to a forbidden land to win the favor of a damsel, and then winds up falling in love with like a fallen star. How much more romantic do you want? Like, that is the definition of a romantic plot. However, it's Buttercup and it's Wesley. Like, how you just can't win.
Hold it. What is this?
As far as that category goes,
I
this
didn't
is a 4.
compare this to Princess Bride. I was really turned off by not really turned off. I thought the one you wanted was under your nose the whole time. Crap. That's such a lame trope.
Right.
Where it's like, I thought I wanted to, it's better off dead, right?
Yeah.
And like, it was fine in the 80s, but by the time 2007 rolled around, do we need to keep doing that? Oh, this cute best friend is helping me, get back with my ex, but then I realized I wanted to be with her the whole time. Just, I can't give a movie that does that a 5.
Sure. Yeah.
As much on-screen chemistry as there was between Daredevil and, Juliet, I guess.
Claire Danes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't give it a 5, but it sure tried. It just did a dumb trope that I didn't care for, and subjectively, I can't quite give it a 5.
And I have to mention that this is our second Michelle Pfeiffer film featured in this list. So, I mean, she's got the secret sauce. You want a movie that's compared favorably to The Princess Bride, you employ Michelle Pfeiffer.
Meow.
This movie explains how Michelle Pfeiffer didn't age at all in the 22 years between movies, right?
And literally showed how on screen.
Yeah.
That wasn't VFX, yeah.
It was just her beauty regimen.
So for the winning movie that is the most like The Princess Bride, what is the final score, Jason?
We give this a 3.18, and that's mostly your fault.
So, I mean, it was a pretty close battle between this and Legend. I am surprised, but he made a movie to try to be not a sequel, but a blood relative to, or an homage to The Princess Bride. And when you do that, I guess you succeed. It's Matthew Vaughn. It's not like he's a hack. I mean, he's a great director. Best X-Men movie by far. So, yeah, if you haven't seen Stardust, and unfortunately, by the numbers, a lot of people haven't, check out Stardust if you love The Princess Bride. Jason, this was a ton of fun. Let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely. And hey, if you are compelled to go in the comments and be like, you guys suck, everybody's seen Stardust, blah, blah, blah. Cool. Thanks so much. We're glad we got a reaction out of you.
That's right. Hopefully we at least uncovered some hidden gems in here, like Lady Hawk. Like, no one's seen that. So we're saying from top to bottom, even though they are ranked, all these movies are definitely worth a watch if you do like a swashbuckling, good fantasy time. But leave in the comment section, like Jason said, tell us what you think about our list. What is your list? What is the top 5 movies fans of The Princess Bride will love, but may have missed in your opinion? Let us know in the comment section. Follow us on Twitter. We are at film_hooligans. Jason Alt, where can everyone find you?
I'm at Jason E. Alt on Twitter.
And I am at Jon the Host. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.